Hello.
Hey, hi, Samya. Hi,
Istela.
Masuma.
Hi, Estella. Nice to meet you finally. Estella, I'll start with you. So, when you think of Pakistan, what comes to your mind? What do you think of really?
I mean, I personally haven't been to Pakistan, but I do have like extended family there. My dad did his um, undergrad there. Like he's a merchant navy captain, so he did his Marine Academy in Pakistan. My youngest brother was sent away to Pakistan for um, from 8th grade onwards because he was being too naughty and we didn't know how to control him. And my dad thought that would be a great idea.
I was just about to say, I was just about to joke. Oh, you're being naughty. Go to Pakistan. We'll
No,
send you off there.
I was at PAF, somewhere in Sargodha. It's like,
Ah,
yeah,
Air Force Academy.
yes. And now he's he suffers a little bit because he, in terms of like getting visas for other places. So that's like, we always joke about it. Like, oh yeah, we'll go there, but you can't go. It doesn't matter. But yeah, like a few places he's kind of like struggled getting in because of that. But yeah, I haven't personally, but I have so many friends, and like I am always seeing their pictures, and it's just so gorgeous. So yeah, it's just that's that's my story with Pakistan. But I mean, we obviously like have a very heavy past, and just like they're always to kind of hover over us, and something that we have to deal with as well.
Samya, like if you think about Bangladesh, what does come to your mind, or what are your first thoughts when you think about Bangladesh?
Of course, apart, Stella kind of mentioned it. I think the first real introduction in our lives, in our each other's countries, is our studying of history and each other's countries' histories, and then the wars and the sort of the parting of the countries from each other. That's kind of played into history. And I don't know about how history is taught in Bangladesh, but I think in Pakistan we have a very biased sort of narration of our history. Uh, One of the wars with India, like factually nobody won that war, but in our history books it says that Pakistan won the war. And I think things like these are very much changed to sort of incite nationalism in all the people, but people who know better and sort of want to read about what actually happened. I think there are quite a few sort of narratives about that that you can sort of read. Personally, though, my mom, my sort of mom's family has lived in Bangladesh. My mom's father used to be in the army, so my grandfather, and they were stationed in Bangladesh when my mom was around very young, like I think between the ages of 2 to 5 or something. So she has really fond memories of Dhaka, and from her I've heard, a few stories. And my late grandmother, she would talk a lot about Bangladesh as well. And one of the cooks in my grandparents, the same grandparents' house, was a Bangladeshi man. And I grew up, with having him make amazing food for us all the time. And I was very close to him. So I think that's just a little bit of sort of Bangladesh that I have in my mind. But of course, I would love to know so much more just by visiting there.
What do you think people have in common, Istela? Like if you see the artwork, if you see, sort of like analyze what you see on, let's just take like Instagram. You see like, this work stream of people from doing illustrations there and in Bangladesh, but can also be generally related to the field of art. Like what do you think people have in common in both countries?
For me, yeah. No, I mean, I think the one thing that I have come across in Samya's work, as well as like other art illustrators that are from Pakistan, is mostly women, and and I think both like artists artists in both the countries are kind of fighting the same fight in terms of equality for women and just finding safe spaces. I think that is comes across very strongly in the artwork in both nations. And yeah, that really strikes a chord with me, because I'm always like, well, that is so powerful, and like that's exactly how I feel here. And I think that's a common ground that we kind of share in terms of what life is like for women.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I've seen both your works, and I feel that you're quite diametrically opposed where it comes to illustrations, how your illustrations look, because like Samya's illustrations are they have a very human quality in the sense that she uses a lot of figures, and the figures take center space, whereas your work is as I read about it, because I had to understand your work, I've seen that your work doesn't have a lot of figurative quality to it. It has a lot of it's an amalgam of different kind of symbologies, really, so to say. So how would you both describe your work? How would you describe how you do it and what you do?
So okay, I completely see what you're saying, and I noticed that as well. And I think that's something that I've always like strived to kind of achieve. But I guess that's just, like I can totally see a theme in when I see like Sammy's work or like Shazil's work. But I think my journey is that I'm still figuring out what kind of illustrator or artist I want to be. Some of my work have to do with just finding a connection with your city. So a lot of it is like Dhaka based, or like finding humor in our traffic, jam. And I have the series on like traffic jam. Even like this T-shirt, which is like I put an orna on it.
Oh, nice! I like it.
It's yeah, I'm presenting. So yeah, stuff like that. So it's like I also like a lot of mixed media stuff. I like collages. So I like hands-on work than digital. A lot of my client work I do digitally. So that is very heavily like based on the brief that I get. But the artist that I want to be from like personally, I think that's a journey that I'm still like on and trying to like figure out where I fit in and what I want to do. So yeah, I think that kind of like shows, I guess, in my work in general.
I think, yeah, I mean, what you guys were saying, definitely, I feel that there is a heavy focus towards women and my own journey as a woman in Pakistan. And yeah, for sure, there's a very strong, I mean, I think we all know that there's a very strong feminist movement going throughout South Asia, And in Pakistan, per se, we've been having our first, since the past few years, the first women's marches. There's a lot of talk about different laws that affect women in our country, and also the violence against women. As women are speaking up, about these things that affect them, the violence. In this patriarchal system, the violence also seems to be sort of increasing with it. So I think there is a very strong need for female artists to sort of who sort of work up on these issues to sort of highlight them in their work and put it out there. And maybe they feel it as well, which is why you see so much of that kind of work. So I think a huge part of my work does have to do, it sort of revolves around that. And then I do have this side where I do a lot of commercial projects as well as an illustrator. I do book covers and film posters. But even for those projects, I think now I've come to a place where I sort of try taking projects which speak to the bigger idea of the kind of work I'm trying to do there. So, for example, with book covers, like 99% of book covers that I've made have been for South Asian female writers. So I think that was something that was really important for me. And the animations and the film posters that I've sort of tried to work revolve around similar issues. So, this is something that I've consciously tried to, take on and sort of work towards. So, yeah. I would also say, I mean, I agree with Istela. I don't think, as an illustrator, to keep yourself relevant, it's also important to keep sort of updating yourself, stylistically, also with the kind of issues you're talking about, and remain relevant. Not just for the sake of it, but obviously something that you feel strongly towards. So, yeah.
I think social media upkeep, I've also kind of been like lagging behind on it. There are so many things or like projects that I've been involved in that are like when like around 3 years ago, I started this project called Invisibellas, which was basically around Women's Day, and it was the first of its kind where we had 15 artists paint on a huge mural like 100 feet wall around different women issues and stuff like that. But like, yeah, I just have to gather all that in one place to like showcase it better. What Samya kind of said about working with women, like recently I feel like I've only been working with women, like all the Her Story projects that we did, like the book with all the women trailblazers. I think back like, I don't know, like 8 years ago when I started in the field, I did experience just not being taken seriously when working with clients, because a lot of it was just, working with brands and doing their branding, packaging, and all that kind of work. Yeah, just not being taken seriously. And I think it's not just the issue of like patriarchy. It's just in South Asia or like in Bangladesh. I don't know if Pakistan is any different, but like having other people value art and design and just understand the time and effort and skills that I will have to put in to make something, and what that means, and how much it's worth. Like that is something I've always struggled with. And yes, it is hard to like, kind of like stand your ground. And especially when I first started, now it's a lot better. I think I can like really fight for it, and be like, I won't do it if it's not fitting my bill. But yeah, that's something I definitely struggled with more.
I would agree with what you just said, Estella. I mean, yes, to a certain degree, there could be certain issues or things that made it maybe slightly harder for us in terms of us being women in this industry and this field. But the thing that's harder is for this entire profession to be taken seriously, and
Yeah.
in Pakistan as well. Because advertising has existed obviously since day one. And when I graduated as a design student from my university, there weren't and my interest when I graduated, I mean, there was always an interest in art and illustration. uh, but the reason I studied design was also because I was coming from a family where it was really important for my parents, that I be financially independent. And
Yeah.
if I had complete leeway and a rich dad, then I would have
Yeah.
definitely studied fine art,
Yeah.
because it was always about the image for me. And
Yeah.
then I had to find some kind of middle ground, because my parents really wanted me to sort of go into architecture. And I tried out a semester of architecture, and I was like, I'm going to kill myself. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
told my parents, okay, I won't do fine art. Don't force me to do architecture. We'll find the middle ground, and that's design. So I was like,
Yeah.
I can get a job, it'll be easier than a fine artist for me to get a job if I study this. And so they came around, and when I graduated, I knew that my main interest is in like illustrating and making visuals. But how is that going to pay? So obviously, I found a job. My first job was in a digital agency as a web designer, and I hadn't studied web design. It was still upcoming when I was in university, so I learned it all on the job. and I was there for like 2.5 years, and then I had a few other jobs as graphic designer. And I also started teaching at my university, my art school, where I graduated from during this time. And
Nice.
it's been 4 years that I was like, okay, now I'm getting enough freelance work, and maybe I don't need a job because I suck at the 9 to 5. But
Yeah.
the transition and being sure about the work and whether this, profession is going to be taken seriously. Am I going to be making enough money every month that I'll be able to sustain myself, pay my bills? I think that was the bigger concern than me being a female in this sort of field.
Yeah.
I think the only way I would say being a female would hinder this or make it, sorry, slightly difficult, this entire process, um, is just just the general part of being a woman in Karachi. Like the thing that I hate the most about living here is how hard it is for a woman to travel around the city.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
we don't walk around here. We can, but it's not safe, and then a lot of people are staring at you and all of that. So there are all these kinds of issues. I usually take a Kareem, which is like another Uber service we have, which is pretty, like, it's not so old, it's a new thing. And before that, I would just walk till the end of my street, find a rickshaw, and pray that I don't get raped. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, so
No, go
that's
on.
a problem. But I think in a way, Corona has also been helpful, because then I could just work from home and tell the client, you know what, I just can't come meet you. We're going to have to do this online. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think there are all these different things. Sorry, Stella, I think you want to add
No,
something.
no, no. You're good.
Yeah,
Yeah, you touched all the bases. I was gonna say that whole like travel bit because
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
as a woman, that's where it really the struggle is, because I was living quite far from this other job I had at this tech company 2 years ago, and I was taking, we have the Uber motorbikes, so because that was the fastest, and our traffic situation is like really bad. So I would take it from like all the way near the airport to Dhanmondi, which is like other end of town, and I'm carrying my Walker, my laptop, my like everything in my backpack, and I'm riding behind this stranger guy, which was, I mean, it's not ideal, but it gets you places fast enough.
Yeah.
And actually, that's where like this whole Orna T-shirt came as well. Like I heard so many stories of women walking in the street, and like some random guy will be like, "Apu, like Orna koi, like where's your dupatta?" And I didn't even like it happened to me. Then I like put it up, and other people were sharing their stories. I was like, this is actually, what is their headache? Like, why is that their problem? And so it's kind of, that's where it originated from. But yeah, definitely the transportation. Now I don't move. I've got a studio and I just don't move. I'm like, anybody wants a meeting, I like either somewhere walking distance or like here. Yeah.
I completely, I mean, I know what you're saying. I've actually also been robbed. So I've been mugged. Mugging is a big thing in Karachi. And so I've been mugged like 4 or 5 times in my life.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my
And one was
Lord.
on way back from a job, and it was like, so this job was actually, I was a graphic designer for this NGO, and it was for disabled people. And part of what that NGO does is like, who have issues with their legs and whatnot, so that they can drive the rickshaw. And so this disabled man was dropping me home from work in the rickshaw, and as soon as I stepped out, these two young men come with guns, and they're like, give us all your stuff. And I
Oh
had
my
my
goodness.
laptop, and honestly, my entire life is in my laptop.
I
So
always say that.
I actually resisted, and I negotiated with them. I was like, please, this is my bag. Take everything you want, but don't take my laptop. And they agreed. And the disabled man was like kind of cursing at them. He's like, she works for disabled people. You're robbing this girl. But that did not deter them at all. They grabbed my things and ran away. And then I was obviously so upset. And, but you kind of get over it, and you get
Thank
back
God
on.
that happened.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. and managed to save my laptop. So yeah, you're right. I think these are our bigger issues living in our countries. But I would
Yeah.
also say maybe as Pakistani women, like the outside world, and sorry, Pakistani and South Asian women, I do feel the outside world is more interested in our opinions or what our thoughts than our own country people are, you know,
Hmm.
because people are like, okay, this woman from Bangladesh, what is her life and how is she dealing with patriarchy in her own way and creating this kind of art? And similarly for women in Pakistan, because right now I was thinking about it, and all my favorite illustrators in Pakistan right now are women and females.
Yeah.
There are some guys as well doing some nice, interesting work, but the
Yeah.
women are phenomenal right now.
Same. I think we
Polished
have
and
more like gritty stories. Um,
exactly.
to
Yeah, what new stuff do the men have to tell, you know? I mean, we have so many stories to share.
yeah.
So it's cool. I mean, maybe in our country, you know, we don't get that, but it feels like when someone from abroad like reaches out, like, what kind of work are you doing? Or, you know, just the fact that you guys were talking to me. I'm having an exhibition in Spain right now, and I'm
Yeah, I just
completely,
saw.
yeah, I was like, what? How? They just approached me out of the blue, and I was like, why not? Yeah, I mean, I would love to take part in this. And
That's
so people
amazing.
are, yeah, and it feels great that people all over the world are interested right now that how is a South Asian woman living her life? What is she fighting against, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. Yeah.
I think a lot of what we see is like the outcome of like a lot of hard work on the social media and websites of artists, right? But I think for young people, you don't know how to go, like, to get there. So if you would have to give a recommendation for younger people, like, what would it be? Like, I mean, yeah, work hard, but like, do you think like to become an illustrator or an artist, you have to study? Like, what are the connections you have to make? What are the what's your personal recommendation to a younger artist?
I think I'm still learning. so yeah, I think Samya, you take this first. I'll yeah, I think I need to hear you. I need to take advice from you.
I think I would definitely go with your first line as well. We're still learning.
Hmm.
I think personally, so I never got to study illustration at my university. It was offered as a subject, but I had a horrible teacher. I just think she didn't like me, and because of that, I didn't like her at all. And I wasn't the best student. I mean, I was interested, but I was also very disruptive and kind of rebellious in university. So she was the illustration teacher, and I did one semester with her, and I was like, I cannot study with this woman. So I instantly switched to photography. And so I kind of graduated studying design and photography, but the love for illustration was always there. And I was like, so I was always finding like projects or, in my sort of assignments for university, finding ways to include illustration. And once I graduated, I told you guys I was at a web design agency. Also, chances to make illustrations were not that, high. You're the web design
Hmm.
agency. There's a lot of different kind of work over there. But even with my workplaces, I think they recognized my love for illustration. And if like, a small project would come along, they would push it my way. But I think from my end, I would really I mean, I'm really happy I did this for myself because throughout those, since 10 years of graduating in the beginning years of having all those different jobs, I made sure that I would always keep making art on the side, making illustrations. And obviously, in the beginning, there were no clients. I would just make illustrations for myself. And a lot of it started because I had a lot of musician friends coming from an art school, and my husband now, who's also a musician, and he was my senior in art school, and he was the first one to sort of ask me to make his album art. Uh, he just started making electronic music, and he's like, can you make some album art for me? And I made it for him, and then a lot of other musician friends started asking me for album art. and then people started appreciating it. I would share it on social media. I think social media, as someone from our generation who's starting out, I think that played a huge role in where I am today with my work, because it got it out there. I was able to share it how I wanted to share it, you know. And I think that's very important as an artist, to have that sort of authority over your work. How do you want it to be perceived? And social media gives you that importance, and you know, that gives you that sort of
Freedom.
space to, yeah,
Yeah.
that freedom. And I think for artists, I mean, I made a Facebook page and all that, but I think Instagram, more so than any other social media sort of platform, really helped, because people all over the world can find your work, you know, and you have to be sort of a bit clever what kind of hashtags you use. But I think in the end, that doesn't even matter so much, as long as you putting out your work, you know, you have a space where people can find you, and all sorts of people will find you. So yeah, I think that's something that really helped me. And then also being open, because when I was starting out, you know, there were no, sorry, I went in a bit of Urdu, but there were no, you know, there were a lot of amazing artists, but when I started out, I did not know any illustrators, rather other than maybe one or two of the illustrators who've made cartoons in our national newspaper since like years, right? And they also had this very old style, old school sort of style of making these you know, like, what do you call those, the funny cartoons. So yeah, exactly. The caricatures and political cartoons. So those were the only illustrators I sort of had to look up to in our country when starting out. So a lot of the illustrators who I was inspired were, you know, from other countries and stuff. And I think now it's different, because now if someone is starting out, I would say there's so many illustrators in Pakistan whose work is amazing. And I would say even over South Asia. And it's so exciting to discover people within your South Asian sort of hemisphere, because the relevance and that point of connecting with each other is so much greater. You know, we all kind of understand where we're coming from. I love that, you know, what you guys call a tubatta, like we call it tubatta, and that entire artwork, I think it's so, I mean, if I translated it and printed it here in Pakistan, it would be just as relevant. Because you're right, I've been you know, for wearing sleeveless at a workplace like this, random person came to me once, like he was a client at the workspace, and he's like, you know, I used to think that women in the West don't have enough money to buy enough clothes to cover their body. He's like, do you not have enough money to buy sleeves for your clothes? That's what he said to me.
Oh
And
my
I
goodness.
was like, oh
They are
my
so
God.
creative in their approach.
That was probably the best comeback I've ever come back in my life with, because usually I get so
Yeah.
flabbergasted when people say these sort of things to me that I don't know how to respond instantly. But I was going through a phase of wearing a cross. Like, I used to love wearing a cross. And when he said this to me, I was like, I'm a Christian. Can't you see? Like, I'm completely allowed to do whatever. And he got all like, oh, sorry, sorry. I kind of went away from the giving advice to young people. Started.
That's good advice. I really like that kind of advice. Think on your feet, literally. So, I've seen your guys' work, and I know that you, one of your works, the Taxi Project, was used by Coldplay in their song, in their video.
Oh wow.
But what, but what is your favorite project? Like, I even loved Sabine's book. That's where I know you from. And what was your favorite project, the one you love doing most? And Estella, you too. What is your favorite? You know.
Um, but I wanted to touch a little bit on the previous question, and also like going back to like finding like my connection with illustration, what you were saying, because I think majority of my career has been based on doing branding projects, which is why my work is all over the place a little bit. But and finding that connection that I really do like doing illustration has been fairly new. So which is something like I'm still like trying to get into and explore and really run with. And ideally, I would like to stop doing all these branding projects and do just that. So I would like to pick your brain on how to sustain yourself doing just that, because that's what I love and would like to do. In terms of favorite project, I think doing the Her Story book was fun because it's just such a big collaboration of like 30 illustrators and 30 different voices. It's basically, you know, the book Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls.
Yeah.
So it's a Bangladeshi version of that, which was curated by my friend Katerina, who works for the Her Story Foundation. And I designed the first book, as well as one of the illustrations inside, which was on Marina Tabassum, this architect based in Bangladesh. And it featured 30 other women trailblazers from Bangladesh. So I think it's just such a like eye-opening project, because there are so many stories I didn't know of, like women pilots, women, you know, all sorts of people from all sorts of career that were not highlighted or not talked about in mainstream media. So that definitely was a great project. And other than that, I just like doing my own experimental illustrations. I don't know if you've seen. I did the series on Pink Floyd songs. So
wow.
that was kind of like my thesis project, which was based on Xerox manipulation and typography and like mixing and matching different objects and materials. I really like that. And eventually, if I do get time off of what I do for my bread and butter, I would like to really explore that and get into that if I ever make it.
I was just deep into thoughts of what Istela was saying about our day jobs and our dream jobs, because they're
Yeah.
kind of separate. And I'm completely there with you on that, Istela, because even though, like I was saying, I started freelancing since the past 4 years, but more than half of the time is spent doing projects that I'd rather use the time for doing my own personal experimental work. And
Yeah.
you know, that is the struggle, the sort of main struggle. And I don't know
Yeah.
if it ever, if because you know, in our countries this field is still so upcoming. So I mean, I hope we get that, we reach a place where we only do passionate projects, but
Yeah.
it takes a while to get there, you know, because yeah. But
Yeah.
coming back to the favorite projects, one of the projects that you mentioned, Masuma, was the book cover for Sabine. So actually, that's one of my favorite projects as well. Except I never that project didn't start by me being a book cover. So this was actually from my first proper official exhibition in Karachi, Pakistan, because illustration is still so very new, and Pakistan's art scene is very much dominated, I think, to an extent by traditional art, and then the contemporary art also, you know, it's nowadays it's more performance based, or it's very minimal kind of handmade art, and digital art hasn't really kind of filtered into the scene yet. So I think to a huge degree illustration is not considered like a part of the art scene over here, and it's very separate. So it's kind of, you know, people just assume if you're an illustrator that's just all about commercial art, which it's not at all. So it was my for my first exhibition, I was approached by this artist Adilo Zafar, who's an amazing artist and very prolific in the Pakistani art scene, and he'd been seeing my illustrative work for a while. And he's like, I'm having an exhibition. It's a very new upcoming artist, and I want you to sort of be a part of that group show. And I was extremely excited because it was at one of the sort of really big art galleries in
Was it at
Karachi.
Sanat?
It was not Sanat, it was at Gandhara.
Okay.
So it was at Gandhara, and you know, it was titled Microcosm. It was the first microcosm exhibition Adilo Zafar did, and there were some really amazing artists who I got to meet, like, and get to know because of this. And so he was an amazing person who kind of really gave me a good direction. He'd seen my work and he knew that I had this huge interest in music, and I had done a lot of art, like I was telling you guys, for musicians. So he told me to think along those lines, and in the end, what we came up with was that I made these album artworks, and each album artwork I made a song with. And my husband, who's a producer and a DJ, he helped me sort of make the music, and another friend helped me to write the lyrics, and we sang the songs. And it was all about growing up as a woman in Pakistan. So each album with the song was about a different part of growing up as a woman in Pakistan, or my sort of my own experience being a woman in Pakistan. And so one of the sort of songs and the artworks was called Cosmic Ninja, and it was inspired by these two young Pakistani twin artists. And they're studying right now in Indus Valley, the same university where I graduated. And it was inspired by these two girls, and they have an incredible following on Instagram, like 100,000 of people, right? And they make this. One of the twins writes poetry, and the other one makes art, and it's very inspired by Islam and how they sort of see Islam. So that in Cosmic Ninja illustration with the woman in the burqa, and I added the sort of ice cream, but it's one of the sisters that I took the image of, and obviously asked her if I could use her photograph as a reference. And so that was one of the artworks. And I think out of the whole series, that artwork kind of got the most sort of attention. And then, if out of the blue, I think someone had sort of shown that artwork, and Sabine Javeri, the author, wrote a book, Hijabistan. And so the artwork seemed to go really well with her book. And then she, approached me about using it for the book. So that's how that artwork came along. But I think that entire series sort of helped me kind of create the direction that I want to take for most of my work since then. And yeah, I think so. For that's one of my favorite projects.
I thought of this other one that I think I should mention, and it's kind of like really personal. And I think the first time that I had kind of had the courage to be vulnerable, and kind of that specific project kind of opened my eyes to see how people relate to your work and what that feels like. And so it was this exhibition called Mind Matters, and I did this animated video in collaboration with an animator about my journey with anxiety. So and it was just so personal. And I remember when it first played, it was like in this room it was playing in loop, and I was just like broke down, because I was like, oh my god, people are gonna see, because it was like my face in like 3 different versions. I don't know if you've seen it. And then it kind of like shows my journey through anxiety and how I deal with it. But even though it was just so open and like so literal as well, so many people came up to me later on, and just still does whenever they see it. And yeah, that really makes a difference when you're like, okay, so you go through the same thing, I go through the same thing, okay, how can we help each other, So that's I think huge.
Sorry to cut you, but mental health is still like such a taboo topic in all of South Asia, that I think it's so important to have artwork that talks about it. I think that's brilliant.
The only feedback I can see like are the comments under your artwork. That's how I see people perceive it. But like when you do an exhibition, like, or when you show something, like people come up to you and they hold your hands and they say,
yeah, it's a whole different yeah, it's very, very emotional. And especially when it's like such a a part of you that you don't want to acknowledge or don't want to really put out there, because you just don't want to discuss your weaknesses like that. So yeah, I mean, it was people just coming in and telling me, like, starting to share their stories about their personal struggle with depression and anxiety. And I used like a cabbage flower in there, which was really random. And this one person was like, oh my gosh, like when I meditate, I also see like this cabbage flower. Like, why did you put it there? I was like, I don't know. It just felt like a calming and beautiful thing. Like it's just what struck me. And then this other person apparently always visualizes this cabbage flower. I was like, what? So yeah, it's really those like personal stories that I think that's what was so amazing. Like seeing art and having people tell you their stories, because we're showing it, to our art and like through this medium that we know best how to communicate through. But that kind of opens up a gate for other people to come and share their stories. I'd say this about the Invisibellas project as well. We were painting in a slum area, like a low income neighborhood, and people behind us would be like, from these people have never seen art, like they don't know why we're spending 3 days there painting a wall. So first of all, that's like blowing their mind, and they're standing behind us and like trying to like be like, oh, she's drawing a lobster or something, or not a lobster, like a spider, because they can't tell like what we're first we're like doing pencil marks, so they have no idea, and they're like, no, you don't know, it's looking more like a bird, like you don't know, they're like telling each other like, oh, you don't understand, let me tell you what that's about. And eventually when it was about like, it was about acid victims, it was about women studying, it was about all these like dowry and all these other issues, and then like women from that like community started to like come and like while we were painting, like start telling us their stories about how their husband left for like another woman, and how she's struggling, how she's pregnant, like all these stories. And at that time we're like painting and I'm like, that's awful. Like, yeah, but then it's kind of like opening them up, because they're seeing us, who we don't come in contact with them so often, and we are addressing these issues that they relate to. So it was really interesting, like how they were opening up about it to us.
I think it's very, very important to work in communities like you did, because that gives them ownership of your project. So they kind of not only relate to it, but they take ownership because they've seen it coming through. And it's such a great feeling when people own your project,
Yeah, there were little girls from that school that were like copying the work and making their own versions. The next day they brought it up and we were like, oh,
How
this
nice.
is like achieved, like goals achieved. But yeah.
How important do you feel self-promotion is to your field of work?
I think about this now, that if it wasn't there, how would I think more than half of the projects that I've gotten are because someone saw my work somewhere online and, inquired about it, and then, got in touch with me. And so now I'm like, oh my God, how did people make a living before social media? but it's a huge part of our work, and sharing our work, and not just locally but on an international sort of platform. And like I was saying, that I think people are interested in knowing the South Asian perspective more so now maybe than they were before, and in other ways than just having one famous Pakistani artist represent all of Pakistan. I think it's much more than that now. Because, for example, like the book covers I was talking about, a lot of the book covers that I've gotten to make since I did Hijabistan, I think that kind of brought some attention, because it was a cover that was really appreciated by people, and it brought more sort of book cover related projects to me. And a lot of those writers are South Asian female writers, like either living in America or somewhere else. And they're getting published by the big publishing houses like Penguin or Harper Collins and Harlequin and such publishing houses. And it's interesting that for these South Asian authors, these international Western publishing houses are looking for South Asian female artists to make the covers for. I mean, they could have easily sort of uh, gotten an in-house job done for the book cover, but there's a more, maybe more curiosity, more sort of like they want to talk about it in a very genuine term, or they want to sort of give that project a genuine treatment, you know. So I think that that's interesting, and social media has helped with all of that for sure. And for all new upcoming artists, and I think everyone kind of does that, because I keep discovering new amazing Pakistani illustrators and artists through social media. You know, and then if I get a project that I can't take on, then I'll recommend those illustrators and artists. And I think that's a great way of keeping the chain sort of going on, and pushing each other up. Because I mean, for illustration to be taken seriously in South Asia, in our country, respective countries, and internationally as well, it can't just be one illustrator representing, you know, everything. You have to push each other up for the entire sort of field to be taken seriously. Okay, so there, you know, people would think, okay, there's so many different illustrators coming from Bangladesh, Pakistan. They all have their own voice, you know, and they all are talking about things which are important, relevant to the people of these region and internationally. I think if we can share that and use social medias to sort of you know, create this sort of what would you call it, like this space where this where we push each other, I think that would be great.
I think my personal journey kind of started a little late, like with art in my life, because dealt with some personal stuff, like, you know, uh, and then I think after I got over some of this obstacle in my life, I kind of started to realize myself as an artist more and own it more. And not until much later did I even have the confidence to put my work out there. It was just such a scary thing for me to kind of put it out there and start that part of and start using social media to promote myself. I still find it very scary when I like put something out there and I'm like, oh my god, now it's like there for everybody to see and like comment and judge. But even that experience and journey has been very interesting in terms of owning myself, growing, and just being like, yeah, this is what I'm, you know, like not overthinking everything about what I'm doing, which happens quite a lot. So yeah, definitely owning that part more and trying to like use social media as a tool that it is and can, and it really is the only thing that can, you know, just shed light onto what we're doing to the rest of the world. And what you said about lifting each other up is definitely something that I also feel very, very strongly about.
So you have dealt with issues, Istela, as you just told us. So don't you think being behind this wall of social media and then behind another wall of your illustrations, it's is it easier for you to kind of speak your mind? Because I would feel that like I used to be very tongue-tied at times, and I felt that I could speak better through paintings and now when I was growing up, there was no social media, right? So it was just paintings. But now through social media, you have one additional wall in front of you, and you can express yourself very carefully, though. But you can connect to the world without being seen as such. Like for me, being seen is I'm uncomfortable with it. But
Yeah,
so I don't know about you. I'm very interested to learn that.
it's still a part of you, so there's always that struggle. No matter how much you're like, you know, behind the artwork, it's such, for me it's just always so personal. If I am making something that is, you know, about my personal journey, which again, like I'd like to spend more time doing, but I don't get the opportunity because I'm caught up with all these like commercial projects. But what you said about being tongue-tied, though, that's something I struggle with as well, and I've always thought that I'm not, you know, articulate enough, or sometimes I just don't have the right words for things. Like even this podcast, I remember telling Samya, like, oh my gosh, like, you know, sometimes I forget English sometimes. And then, yeah. So a lot of my work is very highly and heavily typography based, which is I think subconsciously one of the reasons I use so many words or typography in all my work, and I like the connection of words. A lot of my work has to do with, I did a few posters on certain Bangla words and how kind of like finding humor in the connection of alphabets and the words they represent. I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah, so I'm like really fascinated by words as well. So a lot of my work kind of stems from the fact that I consider, I find it hard to like articulate my thoughts well in conversation. So I think I deal with that through my typography work, but other than that, it's still very scary to put your personal stories out there. But I would not have it any other way. I would do it through art.
Where do you get the inspiration from?
I
You
think
know,
there different things come together to make one whole inspirational ball or something. I mean, for me, usually it's like it can be anything can trigger it. A conversation with a friend, just a new street I went to, or some photograph I took, and then putting those things together. And I think a vibe kind of starts building in your head. And at least with me, it works that way. Like, okay, this is the kind of direction I'm feeling, and it's kind of pulling me, and this is what I've been thinking about. I think for me, a lot of time it's other people's work. Also, I'm just always just like, oh my God, there are so many amazing artists in this world. How am I ever gonna do
You think
anything? Yeah. It's just, I mean, being also online, checking out different artists' work, you're inspired, but also intimidated, and you have to find that middle ground where you don't let wave wash you over completely. But yeah, it's music, it's films, it's talking to you guys right now. I don't know how the sun is looking today. I think for each artist, it's like these different things that sort of come together and right? I
yeah.
don't know. Istela, what is it for you? I'd love to know.
I used to say that I get inspired by chaos and like trying to find beauty in chaos, which is like, I think a lot of my work kind of like my personal illustrations that I do kind of shows that, especially the ones like around traffic and all of that, because just finding humor, in that. I did this jar, which is called dhaka jam. So it's like a jam jar with all the traffic inside it. And it has a little recipe that my friend wrote. So it kind of like, like 5 cows or honk when ready, when, like stuff like that. So yeah, so but I think it's also like evolving a little bit. I'm thinking more about like human relationships and that. I think the next stuff that I do get time to do recently, I've been really like occupied with thinking about relationship with my mother, like not just my mother, but like so many of the South Asian mothers that have sort of kind of like sacrifice their personhood, as they would say, to raise their kids. And I see this in so much in my mom, that, like she has, well, right now she has not much going on, but like everything in her life is based on like our success, and that's all she draws her happiness from. And it's just so fascinating to me, like how, like, I'm not even thinking like that. Like, how am I going to be happy for the rest of my life just drawing from someone else's successes? And we are her success, and that's her life. It's just, and then when I think I posted something along this line on Facebook with an artwork from someone else, and there were just 260 shares, and people started sharing stories of their moms and all the talent they had. Like my mom was a sitar player, and she doesn't play anymore, but because she her life is now dedicated to us. So I've been thinking about this a lot. When I do get time, I'm going to want to do something around this.
Sure. Sounds really cool.
Istela, Samya, now you're kind of connected, but like if you have any questions for each other, like please go ahead. That's the space for it. But
I
obviously
think
you're free
we should
people.
collaborate, Stella. Let's make some art together.
Oh my gosh, I would love that.
That would be so nice.
Yes,
I would
I,
absolutely love
let's
that.
do it.
I would ask you a question about style. It's just something I like really struggle with, because I'm just, maybe it's just like I'm so self-critical. I guess I'm always like judging my own style and like never satisfied. So like I'll always, if it's my personal work, I'll make like 5 versions of one thing and be like, which one looks the best. So yeah, it's style is something I'm always struggling with, and I feel like I need to take time to kind of like create without a brief at all, and just see like what comes out, and what it's it takes me where, and kind of like see through. But yeah, how do you figure out your style? And I know your style is very distinct, and
So I mean that's really great to hear, but it's definitely something I've struggled with as well. I think because initially when I started illustrating, like after graduating, like working on projects and per se, I was just so inspired by so many different illustrators that I didn't want to sort of keep one style, because I'd do one project and I'd be like, okay, this one I want to do it black and white, and then I'd move to the other one. I'm like, for this one, I want to be all psychedelic and crazy.
yeah,
And then so on and so forth. And what you were saying, in the end, it's all the time and how much you work. I think eventually, without you even being conscious about it, a style sort of starts developing. Because it's how you're drawing, it's your hand that's affecting, how your hand movement, the entire visual is getting affected by how you are thinking, your hand movement, and eventually it starts coming together. I don't think you should be too conscious about it, because I was as well. And then I realized that, I maybe had to go through that process to reach where I am. And no way at all, I would say my style is, 100% done. Definitely still developing each time I make, another illustration. And I just kind of treated myself this year, after saving some money, to an iPad. And before I used to illustrate on a tablet with my
it
laptop.
changed my life.
Yeah,
Changed my
so and I am just having so much fun. And so far, I've only done like commercial projects on it. And so now I'm decided I'm not going to take any more work for this year and just
Oh
experiment
wow,
with the iPad.
that is great.
Yeah, but yeah, don't. I mean, I get it. I'm not too harsh on myself, but I have a lot of friends, like how you were talking about sharing your work online. Like, they're not very comfortable, and you have to push them. And like this one friend who does incredible work, I'm always telling him, share your work, but he's just very intimidated. And like he's like, oh, I don't know, if someone says something negative, I'm not going to be able to take it. So I've been trying to work on him, make him stronger and all that. And which is fine. I think everyone has a different level of sensitivity towards their work.
Yeah.
But don't, I mean, maybe it's also important to be so a bit harsh on yourself and not be completely happy. But also don't be too harsh. Let it develop,
Yeah.
let it go, where it's going. And I'm sure it's only going to be amazing and beautiful and wonderful, like it has been so far.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think I've come a long way from when I first started, for sure, of being less critical and just putting it out there and letting it fly. Yeah.
From now on, Estella, I'm your new stalker.
Yeah, you'll see like 500 likes from Stella. But yeah, thank you, Samira and Massimo, for like arranging this. This is really an awesome project, and to be part of it is feeling super special.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys, for agreeing to come on.
Thank
It
you.
was really nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful, guys. And yeah, thank you.
Bye.
So,
Bye.
Bye.
bye.